One of the things that greatly concerns me that's not been discussed in anything I've seen within the town documentation in the last 3 weeks, we've run through a number of days which are otherwise known as red flag days. This is in association with the fact that we've been in an ever increasing degree of drought. You may have seen where there are areas of the state that are now subject to brush fires of long duration. Dover has not had a significant brush fire of even small size. It's been about 20 years. The last one I was in, it's got to be 15 years ago. But major ones, I can't think of the one that goes back at all. Conversely, with 51% of the town forested and very little forestry planned to clear the fallen brush, if you walk through Ms. Peabody's woods, if you walk through trustees, if you walk through any of the parks, other people have indicated to me there's a phenomenal amount of dry material on the ground. I would hope that therefore the selectmen would issue an order precluding the use of any outdoor type of open flame. That would include fire pits, adherence to no cigarette smoking in the brush. I think you understand what I'm saying, because once one of these gets started, there's a phenomenal amount of material there, and it will be difficult to get it out, as you can see in Rockport.
So we appreciate your comments, and we will take it up with the Board of Fire Engineers. So thank you. Good thought. So there being no other comments,
Robin, if I may, it's Justine Kent-Uritam.
Hi, Justine.
Yeah, Robin, no offense, but I tried to get in by using the Zoom link and entering the passcode. I was unable to do so, so I had to use the telephone to get in, so something's amiss. I just wanted you guys to know that, okay? And secondly, if I may, as a former member of the Board of Health's Water Committee, I've been shocked at the number of people that I've seen who've been watering their grounds. It's pretty obvious who's been watering them. My grounds look like something out of Southern California at the moment, and I look forward to hearing what you guys have come up with as far as the average citizen like me reporting people who have very green lawns and what's going to happen about that. And secondly, longer term, I don't see any other future for Dover other than perhaps joining the MWRA. And those are my comments, and I will now continue to listen to you guys, but I can't see you because I can't get on visually, okay?
Okay, so I used the link. I'm not sure what.
I don't know why either, honey. I don't know either, because I usually can get on, but somehow it didn't work tonight. So just FYI, okay? I'll listen in.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Jerry, you have your hand up. You're on mute.
Didn't want you to hear the dog. Actually, she may be more intelligent than me. In any case, I've circulated a number of papers over the last 4 weeks to some interested parties. I today circulated notice that our next drought management task force meeting is Tuesday morning. I won't say fear because that's not the right word, although it is appropriate. I believe that Tuesday, the vote will eventually flow to indicating an extreme drought. This is the first time in many years. And although at the moment, the western part of the state, just west of Quabbin, is not considered severe, it's only moderate, I suspect you'll see an extension of the degree. You'll have to consider what you're going to do once the state has indicated that we are, if you will, in extremis, because Tuesday is not likely to bring any significant amount of rain, nothing to fill a nearly 10-inch deficit. We're currently only at about 32% of the actual rain expected for this entire period. So it's not going to be a quick recovery.
We understand that, and today there are a number of actions that have been taken and we will continue to take on our agenda. So without any further comments from citizens, I just realized that I forgot to take roll call. Shame on me. So I need to take roll call. So Robin Hunter, Board of Selectmen, present.
John Jeffries, present.
Bob Springett, present, working on the video.
Okay. Apologies for that. I got ahead of myself. So the first item of business today is a discussion with Aquarian Water. As many of you may or may not know, John Walsh is here. He's VP at Aquarian Water Company. Aquarian took over from Colonial Water, and we asked them to attend the meeting today just to report to us, what they have seen as far as water usage goes while the community is experiencing a drought. Anecdotally, living in an area that is supplied by Aquarian, I see many more crunchy lawns than I've ever seen, having lived in Dover for 25 years. So I think the communications that are going out appear to be effective. But John, I'll turn it over to you, and perhaps you could just tell us what you are seeing from your data. You're on mute.
Thank you very much. Good evening, and thanks for having us this evening. I do have a short PowerPoint presentation that'll run through, I think, in a structured manner, some of the questions that folks and concerns that folks have brought up. So it is up on the screen now. I'm assuming Chris okay, good, excellent. So again, I'm John Walsh, Vice President of Operations and Utility Innovation. With me this evening is Paul Lawson. He's our Manager of Operations for Massachusetts. Next slide. So we're going to go through a couple agenda items. One is just a refresher on the system, a little bit on water quality, in particular manganese and iron that were causing the discoloration issue in the past. Then I think the big topic for this evening is water supply and demand. We're going to talk about PFAS and then conservation, and then a summary of our system improvements so far and what is planned and ongoing. Next slide. So in terms of the system overview, again, it's a refresher. There's a map here of our distribution system. And on the top of the map, there is the Chickering system. That's a well field with about 15 customers. Next to that is the Springdale system. And that is another well field with, I believe it's between 50 and 60 customers. That has piping connected to the main, what we call our Dover main system, but that main is valved off. So those two systems, Springdale and the Dover main system, are not connected. And within the Dover main system, we have two pressure zones. And just for ease of presentation, one of them is we're calling downtown pressure zone, and the other is the main pressure zone. Two pressure zones because the downtown area is at a lower elevation, so the hydraulic gradient needs to be lower, so our customers have reasonable pressure. The next slide. Actually, before we switch from that slide, the downtown area, the downtown pressure zone, is fed from the Knollwood wells. The main pressure zone is fed from the Francis wells and the Draper wells. And the water from the main zone can be fed into the downtown pressure zone through an interconnecting valve if necessary. Next slide. So in terms of water quality, one of the biggest issues, I think the biggest issue that was happening last year, and when we picked up the system, when we bought the system in December of last year, was the discolored water. And one of the reasons for that discolored water was manganese and iron in the Francis Street wells. The other reason was that the system hadn't been flushed, and I'll get into that in a minute. But we monitor the iron and manganese in the 3 wells at Francis Street well field. I won't get into the details on the graph, but you can see that some of the wells have variable manganese levels and variable iron levels. The well that is consistently the better quality is well C. So that is the well that we have set up to turn on first to meet demands. Right now, well A has the next best water quality. So that's the second well to come on. And well B, because the iron levels, as you can see on the bottom graph, have increased, we have that in the 3rd position. And you can see that in July, well C was about 75% of the production from that well field. Well A was 23%, and well B was about 2%. Next slide.
So do you know what's causing the high iron levels in well C? Because they're all pretty close to one another, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. We see this in other well fields too.
Okay.
There's iron and manganese in the soils around the wells, and we see this variability in other well fields. We think what's happening is as water levels change, especially this time of year, like well A, we were surprised to see, that's the blue line on the top graph, we were surprised to see the manganese levels drop down. We think that's because the water levels have come down a little bit in that well. Well B, we have not researched why that iron level has increased, but data from the 3rd and 4th quarter of 2021 also showed those iron levels. And manganese will cause the water to turn brownish or black, and iron will cause it to turn kind of reddish. And then in terms of the actions we've taken to address discolored water, the first bullet here I already mentioned. We are using our highest quality water wells for the main pressure zone, that is well C, and for the downtown area, that's the Knollwood wells. When we bought the system on December 1st, that well field was offline simply because there had been some pump testing being done in October, November. We got that well field back on because Knollwood well field has the best water quality of the well fields in the main system. In fact, it has effectively non-detect iron and manganese. We also, and that point about the Knollwood wells, it ends up driving our capital investment right now into the system. The second thing we did was we did flush the system in March. Our operators did a pretty remarkable job overnight for a little over 2 weeks. They were out in the middle of the night in March, and because the demands are low and the wells can produce between 400 and 450 gallons per minute, we were able to get a good flush of the water mains in the system. We also operated what we call bleeders, and all that is a hydrant that we're letting run at 5 to 10 gallons per minute. The next step that we are doing right now is we're increasing the capacity and the service area of that Knollwood well field because it's got the best water quality. That project design's done, permitting is done. We're moving into the bidding and procurement stage, and we expect the construction to be done in early 2023. I will say in that note in the upper right, April through July, we only had 11 calls for discolored water. So definitely an improvement from where the system was at a year ago.
How many calls were you getting a year ago?
I know when we picked the system up in December and January, I think we were getting probably a dozen a week. So that's a lot for a system this size.
Right, so this is a significant improvement.
Yes.
I'm sure you'd like it to be zero, but.
Absolutely, yeah. And we think we can get there with this, with the Knollwood well field. The slides on supply and demand that are coming up will give I'll describe how that's going to help us.
Are the 11 customers all within a close geographic area, or is it just throughout the system, the calls you received?
They were just throughout the system.
Okay.
Next slide. So in terms of production, the graph here just shows, it just gives you an idea of where we are getting the water for the system. So obviously in the far right, Chickering and Springdale, those well fields just serve those two small distribution systems. But Knollwood, Francis, and Draper serve the Dover main system. And Francis obviously is the big producer. It's the only producer right now for the main pressure zone. Draper Wellfield is off for water quality reasons. Well number 1 has been off for several years because there was E. coli bacteria positive result a couple of years ago. Well number 2 is off because the PFAS levels are over the maximum contaminant level for the state. Next slide.
And that's the only well in which you have any PFAS levels?
No, I have a slide coming up that shows the PFAS levels. So in terms of a comparison of supply and demand, we do have adequate capacity, hydraulic capacity. So what I've got shown here on the left-hand side, the light orange or yellow, is average day demand in June, July, and August. And this is in the main pressure zone, so the largest pressure zone of our main system. In the, I should have picked colors that I could name. I think that's brown. But the brown ones are the maximum days in June and July in that main pressure zone. And on the far right is what we're able to get from the wells in July in the Francis Street well field. So I've got well C shown on the bottom because it's the first well to come on. Well A is next, well B is third. As I'd indicated, most of the demand, especially on average, just an average day and during the day, well C covers that demand. Well A doesn't come on other than from about 2:30 in the morning to 4:30 in the morning. And well B, I don't think that well has been called to turn on for over a month. Regarding I'll get into another slide on conservation in a couple slides, but if you look at the July average day demand and the August average day demand, you can see there is a decrease. Right. On August 1st, we called for a halting of all non-essential outdoor water use, and it looks like a lot of the customers responded because that's about a 20% reduction in average day demand. We can see at night, that is between 2:30 a.m. 4:30 a.m. Well A, the second well does turn on. That tells us that people are still irrigating, but there has been a notable reduction in demand. And then if you go to the next slide. So what this slide shows is both pressure zones in the Dover main system. And again, it's the average days on the left-hand side of the graph, then we have the maximum day demands in those 2 months. And then on the far right, I added in the Knollwood well field. So Knollwood well field has much more capacity than we're using right now because it can only, for distribution system hydraulic reasons, it can only provide water to the downtown area. the project that we're doing will upgrade the individual well pump capacities and expand the area of the distribution system that the Knollwood wells can serve. And in fact, in the winter months, we may be able to just use the Knollwood well field. And again, the reason for that project is that water quality is very good, non-detect iron and manganese. So any questions on, I know this is definitely of interest to a couple folks who are on here in terms of the balance of supply and demand. So any questions?
So there was a lot of talk with Colonial about them overdrawing the DEP permit. So current demand, is that in compliance with that permit, or are you still seeing excess withdrawal?
Yeah, it's a great question. If you go back to the previous graph, previous slide, so I do have a note in there, wellfield individual day permit limit. So the Francis Street wellfield on an individual day between the three wells has a limit of 0.47 million gallons a day.
Okay.
Each of under the Water Management Act permit, each well field has a daily limit on it. Beyond that, there is an annual limit on the system, and it comes out to an average day limit of 0.13 million gallons a day. The system in past years, including in 2021, exceeded that limit. And that is one of the drivers for conservation, because we're obligated to keep the system demands on an annual basis below that 0.13 million gallons a day. That number does go up to 0.14 million gallons a day in 2024, but for right now it's 0.13. So we're in 2021 and a couple of years before that, the system was over that annual limit. We haven't had an issue with having to go over any of the individual daily limits, like the 0.47. But that's probably one of the biggest, there's two limiting factors for any water system. There's permitting limitations and hydraulic capacity limitations. And that permitting limitation is an important one for the system. The other important one that I believe what we hear was a problem in the past was peak hour demand. So early in the morning, a lot of people would turn on their irrigation systems, and it was happening at the beginning of this summer as well. What we believe what was happening is some of the wells in the past were shutting off in the early morning and causing pressures then to drop in the distribution system. As long as those wells stay on, and we've done upgrades to the system to make sure they stay on, then that meeting peak hour demands is not an issue. So when we go to slide 9. So in terms of PFAS, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, if I could just ask a quick question. This is George Sidgwick, 22 Cedar Hill Road, member of the, the planning board. Can you go back to the previous slide, please? Thanks. Just trying to understand how these speak to sort of average daily uses, but I'm not sure I understand the supply aspect of this. You know, how does this speak to sort of how much is left down there, so to speak? You know, these capacities that are left, obviously we haven't had rain in a long time. You know, I assume they've been drawn down quite a bit. Pardon the ignorance, but if I think about it from a reservoir standpoint, at which point of capacity are we? Is there a way to sort of tell that and how much is left? Is this based on some sort of estimation of future normal usage? How does this work?
Yeah, that is a really great question, because that blue column there, that is based on what we can get from the wells, well, through July, what we're getting from the wells in terms of gallon per minute, and we just convert that to 1 million gallons a day. But the way that wells, you determine the long-term capacity is safe yield. And the safe yield is a measure of the reliable water volume, 1 million gallons a day, that you can get from a well during a drought period. I don't know that we have that data for the Francis Street well. That pump test that was performed last fall for Knollwood, that was the reason that pump test was done, to determine the safe yield of that well field. But what we have done in the immediate, because we were concerned, similar to the question you're asking, okay, a week from now, a month from now, 2 months from now, if it doesn't rain, do we have this capacity? We've put transducers in those wells, and we are monitoring them every minute of every day. We've got trending that shows what's going on with those well water levels. And the well water levels drop when we turn the well pumps on. But in general, we haven't seen in the last month any notable drop when the well pumps are running. But we are keeping a very close eye on those Francis Street wells for this exact reason.
Okay, so there's no way of determining sort of potential capacity that's actually sort of down there, and how long this would last, type of a thing.
Yeah, what we would have to do is what's called a 5-day pump test, and you pump the wells at a certain rate continuously for 5 days, and then that's fed into a model to determine long-term in a drought condition like this, reliable supply for the long term. But we couldn't do that right now because you have to run the wells constantly, and then we'd have to waste water. So we definitely wouldn't want to do that now.
Okay, thank you. Also, I would just point out as a customer, also just an observation, before there was a comment made about complaint calls went from 11 per week to I think 1 now. I'd caution maybe that being as a customer, that being an indication that water quality has gotten materially better for customers. I think it's more possible that we're just sort of used to it now and it's not a new thing. But just like to point that out.
Yeah, I think you said you're on Cedar Hill, right?
Yes.
And I believe that is an area that we were not able to flush because it's a higher elevation and you're on the discharge side of a pump station that's got limited capacity. Yeah,
I think that would affect Robin also, actually.
I never had water discoloration, only because I have a whole house filter. So.
Well, we do too, but yeah. I'm the one that changes the filter.
Yeah, the filter's disgusting. My husband changes the filter, but we never had any discoloration.
Yeah, but I definitely understood that a number of customers have whole house filters, and the only way then that we get feedback is regarding the filters when people change them, and that's not an exact science. If someone has a filter in there for a month or 6 months, and they send us a photo of the filter, it's tough to tell what the water quality really is coming in to that.
Understood.
Filter.
Understood.
We can bring the filters to you when we change it.
We've gotten the photos.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for the questions. Yeah. So in terms of the next slide.
Do you have time for another question?
Oh, sure. Sure.
I'm interested in whether you have any ability to see whether the demand thus far in August, or how the demand thus far in August compares with a similar time period last year. Do you have any data about that?
John, before you answer the question, Kay, identify yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kay Peterson, Board of Health.
we would, I think we have that data from last August, but I don't have it readily available right now. So we could definitely compare last August to this August. If you, and we would glad to get back to you.
Do you know if the dip in utilization or the dip in demand that you've shown between July and August is something that it is unique to this year, is not part of a sort of annual trend? Was that
Yeah,
I would assume people irrigate throughout August in general, and that this is unique and a consequence of the water restrictions. But it'd be interesting to see the data.
We'll put that data together, and I'm sure through Chris I can get your email, and we'll send it over to you.
Thank you.
So in terms of PFAS, the state of Massachusetts enacted a PFAS maximum contaminant level that was effective for this size system last October. So the sampling, the former company chose to wait until October to start taking samples. We as a company, for all of our systems across 3 states, we started taking samples years ago. But the data is shown here. There's a lot of data here. I think the most important things are the Draper well field is the only well field where we've got what's called PFAS 6. It's the sum of 6 PFAS chemicals. So Draper well field has an amount that's over that 20 part per trillion MCL. So that well field is off, and it's going to stay off definitely for right now until treatment is put in place. And but I don't expect that we're going to be putting treatment there. We haven't prioritized it. Where we do plan to put treatment, though, is at Chickering Wellfield and Springdale Wellfield. Again, those are the sole sources for those small distribution systems. We are not over the 20 part per trillion limit, but we're between 10 and 20 parts per trillion. And you can see October, November last year, both of those well fields were close to that 20 part per trillion limit. That may have been a lab issue. We're not sure, because you can see that when we got into this year, the numbers were lower. But we think it's the prudent thing to treat those wells. You can see that Francis Street is relatively low, especially in recent months, and Knollwood's relatively low as well. So we don't plan any treatment for PFAS at Francis and Knollwood at this time. We do we know that the US EPA is going to come out with different PFAS maximum contaminant level proposal in this October. They'll put a final out in October of 2023, and we expect the numbers to be lower than that state limit. So we'll keep you apprised as those numbers start to come from US EPA. Next slide. So in terms of water conservation, there's a lot of information on this slide. Definitely don't expect everyone to read it or even go through it now. In general, we have increased our conservation efforts as the drought has worsened. So we are obligated under the Water Management Act to limit from May 1st to September 30th to 2-day-a-week irrigation. As a company across all of our systems in 3 states, that is our standard. So it fits well with the Water Management Act restrictions in Massachusetts. But when drought conditions are called, even the lowest level of drought, we're obligated to go to 1 day per week. And we did that in May. And then the drought conditions got worse in mid-June to a level 2 significant drought. And at that point, we did, it was August 1 where we switched to limiting outdoor watering to just handheld watering. So all non-essential water use except handheld watering was prohibited as of August 1. And as of tomorrow, because the state has now designated level 3 significant drought for this area, tomorrow we're going to go to prohibiting all non-essential outdoor water use, including handheld watering. And that is in concert with the town, working with Chris Dwelly and Kevin. In terms of enforcement, we did early on in the summer. We have systems and processes for doing enforcement. We did get letters out to folks who we found violating the schedule. In June, we haven't been able to put too much effort toward patrols in the last 6 to 7 weeks, but we have sent out high user letters, and we're going to send out more next week based on our August meter reads. And what we do is, this is again a company standard, for any customers who use more than 16,000 gallons in a month, we send them a letter notifying them that they're relatively high use. To give you a reference point, the average customer uses about 55 to 60,000 gallons a year. And there are numerous customers, I think there's over 100 who are using more than 16,000 in a month, in the month of June. So we think that's just as valuable as the patrolling. I will say the patrolling is difficult because people water between 2:30 and 4:30 in the morning. It's dark and we don't do patrolling in the dark. Any questions on this? Because I think this is probably the most important part of this presentation.
I don't have any questions, but I would like to commend Aquarian for, your efforts in connection with water conservation, being a customer, the brochure that I got at the beginning of the season, just talking about conservation measures that you could take, and then the consistent reminders, I think, have really had an impact on the customers in your service area.
And we do appreciate that there are definitely the vast majority of customers, I think, are listening. So that's good news. I think there's been a very good response for the first year that we're doing this in Dover. We have a lot of experience implementing it in other towns. And I don't think we've seen a 20% drop from one month to the next month in any community that we serve. So the response has been, from our perspective, very good. Next slide. So this is just a summary of improvements and upgrades that we've done and that we are in the process or planning to do. So the first 2 bullets are about work that we've done already. We've put a fair amount of effort into instrumentation and SCADA, which is our monitoring control systems. That allows us to monitor and control facilities, including remotely. We've upgraded chemical and pump systems, and that has improved reliability and performance. The big project we're doing right now is the Knollwood Wellfield project, as I've described, and that will, I think, further increase the water quality in the system. At the Francis Street Wellfield, we were originally thinking that we would be putting treatment for iron and manganese there. But as you could see in a previous slide, the manganese levels aren't as high, at least in the summer, as we thought they would be. And we think with the Knollwood Wellfield project, we'll be able to reduce the usage of Francis Wellfield. So we need to look at this summer's data to make a decision whether or not to put treatment in there. Another project is water storage. In the planning stages, we are planning 150,000 gallon storage tank at our Picardy property. And that will help us with flushing the system. It will give us enough water to really flush the water mains and get sediment that's in there out. It'll also help with everyday operations. Very importantly, what it means is that right now, when there's peak hour demands in the early mornings in the summer, we have to turn on wells that don't have the best water quality just to meet demands. With a storage tank, you don't have to do that. You just pull water from the tank during those high demand parts of the day and fill the tank during the lower demand parts of the day. And then, as I mentioned, at Chickering and Springdale well fields, we are in the planning stages to put in PFAS treatment. And we have actually applied to the state for low interest loan funding for those two projects. And we'll find out in several months if we are going to get approved for that funding. And there is some principal forgiveness with that, along with low interest loan. And that's it for the presentation for today, and I'd be glad to take questions.
So I think I asked all of my questions. I really do. That was a very comprehensive report. So I appreciate you coming in and providing it to us. But my fellow members on the board may have questions. They've been quiet. So Bob or John, do you have any questions for John?
So, John, one quick question from me, John Jeffries. The 150,000 gallon storage facility at Bacardi, give me an idea how big that is. What does that look like?
You know, I don't know the dimensions of that tank, but I don't think it's a ground level tank. We know it would be too difficult to get an elevated tank approved. So we go with ground level, and I think it's no more than 20 feet tall. But we know that there will be a fair amount of work with the town and the neighborhood to get a tank like that approved for construction. We're very sensitive to the impacts on neighborhoods of any of our infrastructure.
Thank you. Bob?
I don't have any follow-up questions. I read through the presentation and it was relatively, understandable. Having you do it made it even more understandable. I sort of like to echo the point that since you guys took over, I think the communication between the company and the town has been much improved. I think that having presentations like this showing progress, showing what's been going on, and showing impact is incredibly important. George raised a good question about how do we know how much we have in terms of capacity. It's easy to see what's happening to the reservoirs out west, which must be reaching critical issues. You can take a look at the color of the river going dry, and that's pretty significant stuff. I mean, we have holes in the ground, and we don't know how much water is under there, and it's kind of a crapshoot. And that's sort of an area of continuing concern because unfortunately we continue to develop. And when we develop, we use more water and we really don't know how much water we have. And with the impact of climate change, we have even less idea about the certainty of aquifers being replenished during the fall and winter and snow seasons and things like that. I would be very interested in hearing if there are people who are doing work in that area so that we have a much better sense of our long-term capacity and our the limits that we can do in terms of growth. I mean, California is going back to the desert. We need to be a little bit smarter here and act more quickly about overall capacity and managing capacity with growth. But I absolutely appreciate all the work you guys have done. I think the presentations and communication between the company and the town has been terrific. And I'll just remind people that I believe that it's only about 1/3 of the people in the community who are plenty of water. And then we have the other roughly 2/3 who are on wells. So we got to get a little bit more information about that side of the shop as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, John. We really appreciate it and we'll continue to work with you. As you know, the town is extremely concerned about water in general. After all, we're all getting water from the exact same aquifer, which is why, we have hired a consultant working with us to help us understand how much water there is and what the options are long-term for the town. But, you know, your organization has been an absolute pleasure to work with, and we expect to continue to have the good relationship that we've established over the last year. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
So I think August 18th is our water agenda. So Mr. Dwelly, I'm going to turn it over to you, because this is, we're going to discuss the implementation of the adoption of the town's water use restriction bylaw that was passed at town meeting.
All
and
right.
I believe you and Kevin McCabe are going to talk about or present an enforcement policy.
Yep, that's right. We've got a short presentation for you, Kate, if you wouldn't mind bringing that up, which just outlines the proposed enforcement policy, the process behind the enforcement policy, and then how we communicate that and what the next steps look like. And so this all drives from the water use restriction bylaw that was voted on at the last town meeting. A component of that bylaw had an enforcement provision. That enforcement provision was left open. All it had said was that the Board of Selectmen or their designee would be responsible for enforcement. So since the town voted that bylaw in May, the Attorney General a few weeks ago had approved the bylaw. It's a process that all bylaw changes go through. And now that we've received state approval for it, it means the bylaw is now in effect. So we thought that the timing was prudent here to put together an enforcement policy for the board's consideration. So that's a little summary of what this agenda item is. On the next slide, Kate, just this is a quick reminder for everybody about the bylaw that was passed back in May. A few of the highlights that I just want to emphasize here is that the bylaw kind of defined and answered a lot of questions that I think a lot of folks in the community had before the bylaw was proposed. So the first is it actually defines applicability of the bylaw, right? So when water restrictions are put into place by the community, who does that cover, right? In years past, we heard a lot of conversations from Colonial Water about them recommending water conservation restrictions, but then not really being able to do much beyond that. And that left out a lot of other people in the community. So the bylaw defined that all Dover residents are covered under this, all Dover residents and businesses, regardless of where they source their water. The bylaw also defines who can declare a drought emergency. And what this does is it provides the town with more local control. Right now, as we heard earlier, the DEP primarily has been declaring droughts through the Drought Management Task Force. With that, they provide a list of water conservation recommendations. But beyond that, there wasn't really anything that the town could do to be able to have more local control on its own kind of water restrictions if they wanted before the bylaw passed. And then it also defined how you communicate certain drought statuses as well as restrictions that the town might want to put in place to conserve water. It defines what non-essential use means. And then of course it creates the enforcement mechanism, which we're here to discuss this evening. So on the next slide, our proposed enforcement plan is that this fall under the responsibility of the Public Works Department. The team, Dave, Kate, and Kevin had done a lot of research on how other communities have structured this, and there seemed to be a large majority of towns who had this within their Public Works Department. I think that is because a lot of communities' water operations, if they have them, fall under the Public Works Department. And so the Public Works Department would be responsible for investigating complaints of violations of any water restrictions that the Board of Selectmen puts in place. They'd also be the ones that would be responsible for issuing violations for any violations of water restrictions that are in place. And they're also the entity that would be responsible for coordinating with Aquarian. You heard from John a few minutes ago about how closely the town and Aquarian have been working together
on these drought conservation measures and communicating with one another. And that'll be an important facet moving forward. And so the process that we've outlined is summarized here. The first would be submission for folks. So anybody in town, if they want to make a claim or to submit a case, so to speak, of a potential violation of our water enforcement bylaw, they can use 3 channels. One, they can call the Public Works Department directly at their main line. We've also set up a dedicated email, Dover Water, where people can make the complaint. And then we've also created a form that is on the town's website. It's under the Board of Selectmen's main water website. And it's also under, it will be under the Department of Public Works website as well. So people are able to submit information in there. And what's nice about the email and the form is that you can also attach imagery if people so choose about, certain violations, which helps the department then go out and investigate. So speaking of investigation, the next step would be that the complaints come in, and then the DPW director coordinates with their team on going out to actually investigate the complaint, either to see it in action or see if there's any light investigation that they can do to see if there was a violation of any of the water restrictions in place. The coordination with Aquarian is also important. One of the things that I'd highlight here, I'd pause to highlight here, is that one of the things that we heard from the board and we heard from the community, certainly leading up to town meeting with the presentation of the bylaw, was that there really wanted to be an emphasis around education, and this not to be almost a secondary police force in town, that we really wanted to educate people about the importance of conserving water and ways to do that. And so it's outlined on the step 3 under communications, but we'll be sending out, the plan is to send out at least 2 letters to people who potentially are violating any water restrictions, to let them know that, hey, the town has a water bylaw. Hey, here are the current water restrictions in place, and here are the reasons why it's important to conserve water. After those 2 letters, then the fine schedule kicks in that was outlined in the bylaw. And so the relationship with Aquarian there is that for Aquarian customers, the Aquarian Water Company will be the one who will send out those first 2 letters. And so as we get complaints in, and as Aquarian does as well, there'll be constant communication between the town and the water company. And we're in the works of setting up a kind of data sharing setup so that we can automate that information to make that a little bit easier. And I've talked a little bit about the step 3 of the communications here, about what that looks like. So again, we're really focused on education. So really, if any restrictions are in place and individuals violate those restrictions, they will essentially receive what I'd consider to be 3 written warnings, 2 letters before the fine schedule kicks in that's outlined in the bylaw. Then the next touch point is a written warning, and then after that would be the first fine. So it's kind of 3 opportunities to remind people about the importance of what we're doing here. So on the next slide, I just wanted to highlight how we're communicating this. So I had mentioned that we'll have a website set up. So Kate's done a great job putting together a whole web page for everything related to just the water restriction bylaw to live. We have a lot of other information related to water, but we wanted a dedicated page on the bylaw. So not only do we want the bylaw text and related information there, but we'll have things like the enforcement policy, that online submission form for potential violations that I talked about, and then also additional drought resources for folks. And then our next steps would be, should the board choose to adopt this policy, would be to order new signs to align with the bylaw. We presently have a few signs up that I think are doing a good job kind of bringing some education and some visibility to the community about our current state. But we wanted to make sure that our new signage matched the particulars of the bylaw that was passed. So we'd move forward with ordering these, and then those would go up depending on the situation, whether it's a restriction or an all-out ban. And that's it. So that's our quick presentation. In your packet is the actual text of the enforcement bylaw that we're asking the board to consider this evening. also included in your packet is the actual bylaw if you wanted to reference it as well. So with that, again, I just wanted to thank all the great work that the team had put in on this, both Kate O'Brien and Kevin McCabe for really getting this to the place where it is this evening.
So I thought, Chris, I think that was a really succinct overview, and it did take into account everything that, we as a board had discussed in connection with the enforcement policy. As you made the presentation, I had one thought, and I think it was jogged by the presentation that John Welsh made from Aquarian. So one of the things as an Aquarian customer I found quite useful was at the beginning of the summer, they sent out a postcard just reminding people of the summer months and the various kinds of conservation measures you could take. And I was thinking that might be something we can do as well, maybe include it in the May tax bill, because that's right at the beginning of the season. And it's just a reminder that, you should be mindful of excessive irrigation use. After all, we're all utilizing the same aquifer. Their little postcard was actually really, really informative, and they had a lot of different things that you could do or ideas for conserving water. The other thing with respect to the website, is that set up exactly the same way as Carol, where it's right on the front page and there's a link directly to the water bylaw, so it's easy for people to find?
It wouldn't be, or at least currently, we haven't thought to kind of put it down in one of those large squares. What we were thinking about was replacing the notice banner that's right at the top of the website that currently says, there's a drought with, hey, new water restriction by the Board of Selectmen. Here's some information. We're thinking about placing it there, but that's also a good idea actually now, to maybe, at least for the rest of the season, perhaps swap out the community center project with this water information, especially as we're moving forward with, implementing new policies and, asking things of the community. That might be a good place as well.
Right. And I think one of the things is, I think we're going to get a high level of compliance, but there are always going to be those individuals that won't comply. And, at the end of the day, the only thing you can do is fine them, because you can't shut their water off. So, it's not a reasonable expectation that we're going to get 100% compliance. But I thought the overall policy is a good one, and I am glad we're in a position right now that it got approved and we can begin to enforce it. John and Bob, do either of you have comments?
Yeah, I do.
Go on.
You can go.
Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you, John. I think that the critical next step is communicating to the community, and I think what's been outlined so far, putting something on the website is it's inadequate. I think when I went through the bylaw and I went through the various sort of levels, drought levels, and what the board can and can't do and what that may or may not mean, I found it terribly confusing. I think that what has to go out, you have to send out a notice of this bylaw being approved on reading, and you have to explain in detail and what it means, how, what the different stages are, what the responsibilities are between the different stages, stage 2 and 3, when you can do something and you can do something, but only with a hose where you can't do anything. All that information, including, all has to go to every household. not just people who are on the website. That's simply inadequate.
Well, it already went to every household though when it was approved at town meeting.
It's not
I mean,
enough, Robin.
Right. I mean, we can certainly send out something more, but you know,
what we need is almost like a that is. I mean, I remember talking to Faye about putting up sort of crystal information about COVID-19 and what kind of information has to be. It's simply the same thing. You know, people aren't around in July and August. We need to engage and inform citizens, and you know, right now we just don't have enough. We don't have enough people who go to the website on a regular basis. So I think that's really the most important next step. The other thing is sort of a silly thing. 36 inches sounds like a wide sign. Is that the legit sign? I mean, the ones that we have up, I think, are pretty nice, but I don't think they're 36 inches wide. Is that sort of a state thing?
That's a preference thing. The current signs are about 18 inches wide. These go in kind of in sync with the size you would see entering the peripheries of Medfield.
Right. So have you seen those signs in Medfield going down Hartford Street?
No.
For those of us that are somewhat blind, they're a good size to see.
I pay attention to driving. I don't look. I'm looking for animals and kids and other cars. I was just, you know, like I said, it was a silly question. It just seemed large.
They're also more horizontal, right, than vertical. If they're the same size as the Medfield signs.
I like the color. I think the color is nice and bold and should stand out, so that's fine.
Bob, you done?
Yeah, John. Thanks. Sorry. Thanks,
so I agree with Bob. It's inadequate. And I think that along the lines of our communication process, we have to take the approach that we took when we had a boil water and the E. coli issue. It's got to be ever present, and it's got to be something that people cannot use the excuse, I'm away for the summer. And I've heard that so many times over the past week. It just makes me question the fact that we should be using the electronic billboards that we have. We've got one that Highway uses for at the RDF. We've got one that the emergency transport building uses. Those should be used immediately. And I know one is at Highway. Kevin, where's the other?
Our board is currently at the transfer station.
Yeah, where's the other?
Police owns the other one, so I don't know where they store it. I would assume at their facility.
Yeah, so I would be using those immediately, and I would be using them as you've done in the past. Put them in locations in the highest traveled, highest visibility locations. You know that better than most where those should be. Kids are back to school athletic wise next week. There should be one there. There should be these should be happening immediately. And I just agree with Bob that the excuses of we're away for the summer, and that a lot of people, in fact, there's a dozen homes and a dozen people I've already been in touch with, because I know who they are. I know that they're away, and their lawn is as green as you can be. They are watering every day. So since the ban was approved by the legislature, I've been notifying them, because they should be expecting something from us. And the excuse was, just as Bob said, we're away. So we need to be doing everything that we can do.
The website, just for the boards, Robin, if I may, was just to emphasize on it's a third or additional channel for people to be able to make concerns. the bylaw itself spelled out all of the required communication channels should the board want to take any action, and they included all the things that the board had mentioned. So the board we have to provide notification in a newspaper of general circulation, signage on major roadways and intersections, electronic notifications via text, email, web, and other such means reasonably calculated to reach and inform all water users. So, we certainly took that, the emphasis around communication in and put it as a requirement of part of the bylaw. So if the board, for instance, in your next agenda item decides to declare a state of water supply conservation, all that information would go out under all those mediums. The bylaw, what restrictions you put into place, the information, all that would go out under all those mediums. So hopefully that's enough penetration throughout the community for people to understand what's in place.
Is the information mailed to their houses? I didn't hear that.
We do. If the board votes to say that they want it to be mailed to houses, yes, I think that would fall under other such means reasonably calculated to reach and inform all water users.
Again, it's the only way you can assure that everybody in town gets notice. All those other things, it's not the case. So I don't understand why that hasn't happened already. I mean, when we did Carol, we sent notice to every household. We mailed out what was going on.
There's nothing in place, Bob. There's nothing. The bylaw was adopted by the state, approved by the state, but all that does is essentially allow now the board to take a vote to actually do something with that, which is on your agenda.
That's what we're doing this evening.
Right now.
Yes, I understand that, but that's a big change, right? This bylaw and around water. This is a big change to how things have happened in the past. And I really think that when you have a big change and the board's going to do action, it needs to be explained to people, because the couple of hundred people who were at the town meeting in May represent a very small fraction of the population. So I mean, I don't know what the problem is here. Our obligation is to tell people what's going on. And that bylaw was passed. The bylaw has consequences. The board has new authorities. That board is going to act. Here the outline. Here's the framework. It needs to go to every household.
Nobody's arguing. The only issue is we had no authorization to do anything until this evening when we vote. As soon as we vote, all those things that are in the bylaw will begin to be communicated.
Yes, and the only thing I want to make sure is that we talk about being communicated, that it includes mailing to every house. But we haven't seen that in any of the material.
So, Robin, do you want a motion to adopt the to adopt the bylaw and the bylaw enforcements that as outlined?
So there is a suggested motion that I was going to make, which is, to move that the town of Dover is in a state water supply conservation, that all non-essential water use as defined by the Mass DEP be banned. And I guess further that the town institute all the communication channels that were outlined in the bylaw to communicate such measures to all citizens, including a mailing to go out to all households.
I would second that.
I have a question before I vote. So how does what the state does, the level, does that trigger our action, or could we act independently?
You act independently with the exception of the state declaring a water emergency.
So when we talk about the level, whatever level it is that more restrictive than what the state currently requires?
So the recommendation, the DEP's recommendation for level 3 drought is to ban all non-essential water usage.
Okay, and so generally speaking, we would be in sync with the state's view?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And that's how we wrote the bylaw. So the state provides recommendations for each level of drought.
Yeah.
And
Right.
our bylaw mirrors that.
And Chris, one more quick question on the back of what Bob just asked. How do we find private organizations like the Charles River School, whose grass is as green as the Emerald Isle?
We've got a violation book, and the town has, under this home rule petition powers, essentially finding authority to find all entities operating within the within the boundaries. How we would collect that if they chose not to pay the fine, might be a little bit different, but that's something that we could address or address if it came to that. But it could be things around withholding permits and other types of ways to ensure that fines are being collected on these violations.
Yeah, thank you. I just asked because it's the most striking example in terms of the one that's come up the most since this has become, since we've had the ability to do this. So thank you. So Robin, where are you?
I need a second on my motion.
John gave the second.
I did. I seconded.
Okay. So all in favor? Aye, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springer.
Aye, John Jeffries.
So Kevin and Chris, do you have enough to work with there?
Robin, if I can just get clarification. So the motion included the adoption of the enforcement policy, as well as the declaration of a water supply conservation and ban of all non-essential water use, and also us communicating that ban and the new bylaw by the method that you mentioned. Okay, great.
Right. So I think I covered everything. It was a mouthful, but I think I got it all.
Okay, we got it.
All right. Well, thank you all. So, and we continue with water. So the next item on the agenda is the Water Resource Committee creation and potential vote for that. As all of you know, there was a Water Resource Committee under the Board of Health that did some really good work to get us started with all the water conservation. They were the ones that worked with the town to put in the monitoring wells so that we could monitor the depth of water. They also began the communication of water conservation methods. That committee is really the foundation of, or got us to where we are today. What the town decided at the last town meeting was we want to take all these measures even further, and the town voted for us to hire a consultant so that we could put a long-range strategic plan into place that would answer some of the questions that were discussed at tonight's meeting, such as how do you monitor the supply within the aquifer? What are other options potentially to the town for water or bringing water to the town? How much development can the town continue to have given the limitations on the water supply? So as most of you know, we did go through a robust bid process, and in the end hired a consultant, CDM Smith, who has begun the process of pulling together the study that we're embarking upon, which will ultimately provide us with some recommendations for long-range plan with respect to water. In discussions with the Board of Health, we determined that what we would do is now disband the Water Resource Task Force, and instead put together this Water Resource Committee, which would fall under the Board of Selectmen. This committee is the committee that has actually been doing all the work with the consultants going through the RFP. The committee consists of town staff. So we have representatives from the DPW, the Board of Selectmen's office, and some other town staff. We also have a representative from the planning board. We will also have somebody from the Board of Health on the committee. And, you know, we feel that having those various representatives really will touch upon all of the critical inputs that we need. The consultant is really going to do a very robust outreach to not only committees, but also to citizens. You know, I think that this committee is a very important committee. And what I would like to do is just make an official motion to set this committee up so that we can continue to do the work that we've done.
So Robin, is this a formal committee, like the building committee? We have to vote on appointments and all that kind of stuff, or is this a working?
No, so what I was thinking is it's a formal committee in the sense that it's a committee that's established, but rather it's not going to be formal in the sense that you have to make appointments. The way the committee will be set up is there will always be representatives from the various committees that we talked about. And those committees can send, you know, a representative.
Okay, so there won't be,
you know, we're going to have regular, right, we're going to have regular scheduled meetings. You know, Chris and I talked about how important it is, and CMD Smith, how important it is to communicate to the town what we've been doing. So there will be regular communications, and we're also going to update that on the water webpage, where there's a lot of information on there. You know, one of the other things we talked about was over the last couple of weeks, there have been some creative suggestions that citizens have had for water conservation. And we thought it might be also a good spot on the web page just to put those suggestions up. Like, for instance, reusing water that you boiled corn in to maybe water your plants outside when it cools down. There's just different things that people can do instead of just throwing it down the drain.
It's the old gray water usage.
Right. You know, they're citizens in Dover on some of the non-town social media outlets that, you know, they're collecting rainwater. Well, if it ever rains, they're collecting rainwater. But there are
very little bit of that.
Right. There are very creative. Well, somebody posted she was so excited with the weather forecast, she went and put down all these collection barrels, and then nothing. There was no rain.
Yeah, it took a left at Sherburne.
Took a left somewhere. But, you know, the committee's done a lot of really good work. We also have, we're also very fortunate to have Ron Myrick, who's a citizen of Dover, who is very active on this committee, who has the actual professional expertise to help guide us.
And so, Robin, you and Chris will be given regular updates at the Board of Selectmen meeting as well as another avenue for people informed, right?
Right. You know, we're just kicking this off now. We had our first kickoff meeting, but we wanted to formally create this committee tonight.
So, Robin, would you like a motion for this, or would you like just to a motion?
I would like a motion to create a water resource committee, or the role of a water resource committee. Is that all you need, Chris, or something else?
Wait, are you asking Chris?
I want to make sure I give Chris what he needs.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay. So John, do you want to second that?
Yes, second it. And just for this, again, clarification, a formal committee, but not a standing committee, and a formal committee, but not a committee with its own budget. Correct?
Correct. The budget falls under the Board of Selectmen.
Robin, if I may, sorry, it might be best if you reframe it as in the motion as a water resources working group.
Working committee or work, yeah.
Okay, all right. So why don't I change that, the creation of a water resource working group, which includes town staff, certain citizens of the town, as well as representatives from the planning board, the Board of Health, and who am I missing, Chris? And the Board of Selectmen, I guess.
Okay, second.
All right, all in favor? I, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springer.
Hi, John Jeffries.
All right, thank you.
Hey, John, how come you're not in the screen?
Because my arm is tired. I have to hold the damn phone up because I'm in the wilds of Canada and I'm on my phone. And I can't write and hold the phone and keep track of all the things going on and think of the questions to write down and do it all while holding the phone. I haven't figured that part out.
I thought you were a multitasking devil.
Try to put the phone in about 8 different places and I can't figure out where it will stay.
All right, I have 14 computers open because for some reason I couldn't log in on a device.
John, are your kids with you? Doesn't anybody have a selfie stick?
That is just way, way too much. You don't want to see that in use. No. Kate and Chris would both disown me if I ever did that.
So once again, we're running really late here at these.
Right. Well, I think it was worthwhile with the water. So I'm going to go to 1.5 now. I think the rest of the things will go pretty quickly. So it's Chris is going to present. It's to approve the lease between Dover and T-Mobile Northeast LLC for lease of space on the cell tower at the highway garage facility.
Thanks. That is actually pretty much it. So this is the same exact lease that the board has approved for the other 2 bidders, AT&T and Verizon, and T-Mobile. Just take some time with the lawyers, making sure everything is getting explanations for everything. But again, this is the same exact lease. This actually wraps up the process for the tower. If this is approved this evening, then our special counsel, Bill Solomon, can then work with the 3 carriers on the next steps on actually implementing the small tweaks that may take effect on the tower, and then the new leases will take effect.
So I move to approve the lease between Dover and T-Mobile Northeast LLC for lease of space on the cell tower at the highway garage facility.
Second.
All in favor? I, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springer.
John Jeffries.
All right, so then that passed. The next item on the agenda is so somebody needs to help me with this last name here. So it's the appointment of Mark Adamczyk. Is that right? To the
Adam Zek
to the Open Space Committee.
Correct.
So should we? So I will like to thank Mark for volunteering, and I would like to make a motion to appoint him to the Open Space Committee.
This is a reappointment, right?
Is it?
I thought he was being reappointed, but again, I'm futzing around here with technology.
Yeah, well, I just paged down a little too fast, so I am having the same issues.
So in any event, he's up for a 3-year term, and I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye, Robin Hunter.
I love Springer.
John Jeffries.
All right, so the next item of business is to vote on the meeting schedule, the Board of Selectmen's meeting schedule.
We have too many meetings. We need to like cut them in half. So, it looked good to me. I will remind people that I cannot make the second meeting in October.
So Bob, do you have an objection if John and I just move forward ourselves? I mean, what we could do is make sure that there's nothing controversial on the agenda.
Yeah, no, I think that would be fine. I mean,
Okay.
I'm going to be in Europe.
Okay.
So I just don't know. You know, if there's something critical, I could probably, you know, with the 6 or 7 hour delay, figure out a way to
Right.
attend. But
So you know what? Maybe if it's something critical, we do a morning meeting.
okay, I think we can. You know, I'm not going to be in the outback like John is, so I think you know, I think we can. But I just want to make sure that everybody's aware. So
Okay.
we
I mean,
need some.
right. The issue is if in Europe it's midnight now, so makes for a late night.
Yeah, and I'll probably be tipsy, so who knows what I'd say from Europe now. But I'm going to be a little bit further east, so it might be a 7 or 8 hour time zone change. I don't know. I haven't looked.
Okay.
Oh, okay, just so you know.
All right. And then the next item of business is fiscal year 23 goal and objectives. So I'm going to turn that over to Chris.
Thanks, Robin. The spreadsheet in your packet is a summary of the board's conversation during your last meeting that focused on goal setting, where the board coalesced around kind of 3 core new priorities, I would say, for FY23. The Board of Selectmen size study that was voted on at town meeting, a bylaw review / potential charter creation, and the third was around succession planning. So with that, as I've done in years past, I've included some potential and suggested key actions for the board to review and dialogue about, and then confirm. Also on that spreadsheet is a list of kind of continuing ongoing initiatives or projects as well. So hopefully a full glimpse at what FY23 looks like. So it's really up to the board at this point to either confirm, or I think I did hear at the last meeting that there was thoughts about having another focus meeting to shape out the scope of these goals. So it's certainly, I guess I turn it over to the board at this point.
Right. So I would say, you know, the charter review and especially the succession planning, just maybe worthwhile just spending some time with you, coming up with a more refined plan. But if the other members are comfortable with it as is, then I wouldn't insist on having another working meeting.
I would like to have I would be in favor of having a second meeting just to make sure that as we go through, I have a list of things that I don't want to cover tonight in the essence of time. But I would like to review some of these things, and in particular, when we're talking about bylaw issues, I would really like to take a run at the issue of volunteer employees reporting to volunteer boards. So a couple of those things I think I'd like to spend a little bit more time on.
All right, so why don't we just ask the town administrator to set up a working meeting? I would suggest that we just have a follow-up meeting that focuses only on those two items.
I agree. And Robin, one of the things that I did with regards to the Board of Selectmen size group is I went out to towns that have, within the past, say, 5 or 6 years, gone through and discussed this and taken up this item, going from 3 to 5 or 5 to 3. Starting with Sherburne and reaching out to the members of the committee that actually met to determine that that was the direction they wanted to go in. I actually have 2 people who would be willing to serve and to help us with this, because one of the things that we probably should do and consider is how do we go out and determine what towns have done this, how they've done it, what's the method they took to review the process, and then was that process actually successful in their mind in hindsight. So as we've done with everything else, we spend an awful lot of time putting the right people in the right place to review all these things, whether it's Carol or any of the other items that we've taken up. I think we have done an exceptional job with that. And this is one thing that I really want to make sure we get right as well.
Right, so then Chris, we can, discuss all 3 of the goals and just focus a little more on process. So we should set up a meeting as soon as possible so that you can get started.
Okay, we'll send out some dates tomorrow
Right,
for the next
great.
week and the week after.
Okay. Then there are the next item on the agenda is the Board of Selectmen's items. So the first item of business is traffic safety sign discussion and potential vote.
Yep, so this was a request from Selectman Jeffries to talk about some potential signage, safety signage at certain locations throughout town.
So this is an item that we've talked about, Robin, that came to us 2 years ago, specifically one from Chris Yoda. Chris is the gentleman who runs the farm stand and on the corner of Main and Haven Street. And he has several students that work for him throughout the summer at various times. The traffic at that intersection is terrible. The stop sign at that intersection is routinely run over by trucks and cars. As a matter of fact, Kevin will tell you this, that the sign currently is on a portable sign in the island of Haven Street at the intersection of Main. So Chris's farm stand, as you all know, is about 75 yards from the intersection. The intersection has a 10% grade reduction, meaning that when you turn the corner, you cannot see the farm stand because it's not only a turn, but it's a downhill. So what Chris has asked for is a sign on not only after the stop sign going down Haven Street, but as you approach Main Street from further down Haven Street, by Candace's house, right before where Trout Brook crosses, to put a sign at where the police are, where the police are parked most of the time, right there, to slow traffic down. That's item number 1, and I'm sure there's others, Chris, that and Kevin, you've probably come up with, but this is just along those lines, and we've been talking about this for over 2 years, and we really, it's way overdue.
So the town's bylaw states that the board of selectmen is the entity, the authority for new signage on town roadways. And so, if Kevin perhaps can speak to what potential signage could be put up there if the board wanted to take that path. And then again, it's really a vote on whether or not the board wants us to do that.
So last time I remember, we were experimenting with, I think, changing the yield sign in town to stop sign, and it got the chief involved. So it was Greg at the time, and I think the chief were looking at that particular intersection. I guess it's Dedham and Springdale, and to do something. Has anybody talked to the chief?
Right, that was going to be my suggestion.
Oh, I beat you to it, Robin.
Right. Well, I've talked enough.
No. You're making great points, man.
Yeah, I mean, because I remember, the intersection on the other side of Haven coming off of Springdale. So I think it was the chief working in conjunction with the highway department. So that would be, working with Kevin.
Yeah.
They put cones up first, and they figured out the right traffic flows before they put permanent signage.
Yeah, I remember the same thing for in town.
So that was Haven and Springdale, and that started with Bobby, and started with what you're talking about, Robin, is it started with Bobby, then Craig, and making what was a very fast right turn from Springdale onto Church Street a more gradual right-handed turn from Springdale onto Church Street. The same was done at the intersection going up Walpole Street onto it's the second right as once you passed going up Walpole going towards Cedar Hill. It's the second one before Cedar Hill. That same intersection was what Craig referred to as a soft shoulder intersection, and what he did was create a more sharper right-hand turn. So
I don't think that happened, John.
He did. It did happen, Bob. They did create it. They built out the intersection. They built out the shoulder on the right-hand side to make it a more 90-degree than it was a gradual turn into.
Yeah, I thought that people in the street complained, and it didn't actually happen.
Yeah. So
That's the process.
I think the point we're trying to make here is, I personally don't feel comfortable making traffic recommendations because I don't think it's my professional strong suit. So what I suggest we do is ask Chris to work with Kevin and Chief McGowan to make a recommendation or approve the request.
It's the other way around, Robin. What Chris has said to us is it's our responsibility to do it. We've asked them to do it. They've brought it back to us. It's our responsibility to do it. Even
I don't recall a recommendation. I just don't recall that being done. So
what do you mean, a recommendation?
It doesn't mean it hasn't been done. My understanding was that this was a request from the property, from the individual that runs the farm. I'm just a little bit confused.
It's real simple. Let me. I don't know what part you're confused about. Chris Yoda, for the past 2 years, has asked the town to put up a sign slowing traffic down, and that sign, Bobby Tosi 2 years ago had a mock of what the sign would look like with a tractor and it was like a yellow sign. Chris, when that request was again brought to Chris for the second or third time, Chris told us specifically, it's got to be a board move. And I'm reminding both of you, and maybe it's just you, Robin, that Craig did the same thing. When he wanted to put in the blinking stop signs, we had to approve them. When he wanted to change the shoulder from Springdale onto Church Street, we had to do that. So this has been something that we have done in the past. And when he wanted to put the blinking stop sign on the intersection at Haven and Center Street, we did the same thing.
Right.
But when he,
I remember, John, that Chief McGowan was involved, and I agree with Robin. If you're dealing with traffic, I want the police chief to have to opine on its efficacy, not just, you know, a resident raises an issue and we do X, Y, or Z.
so what do we?
I think all we have to do is, I mean, Chris, maybe if you could just confirm with Chief McGowan that.
What I can do is I can get Chief McGowan and Kevin together, and they can take some picture, show what a sign would look like, and have that information as a standalone agenda item at the board's next meeting for discussion and then potential vote. Does that work for the board?
And I'm assuming, Chris, I'm assuming the sign, it has to meet some sort of state regulation, right?
Yeah.
Through the chair, yeah. Basically, the MUTCD, which is the Manual and Uniform Traffic Control Devices, that's kind of our go-to as far as signage. So what John's referencing is actually called the W11-5, and it's an advance warning for a potential farm apparatus or farm crossing. Okay. I drive the location every morning coming to work, so I certainly, I understand the board's or John's initiative to echo the resident, and certainly have locations in that sign identified. We're happy to get together with Chief McGowan.
Good.
Send that to you.
Yeah, I just feel that would dot the I and cross the T.
Right. All right. So I think we have an action item there and we can take care of it at our next meeting. So the next item is upcoming agendas and discussions. So now you have a new item for our upcoming meeting on September 8th, Chris. So I don't know if there's anything else that people would like to add to the September 8th meeting. You know, I don't know if we should have it as a formal item, but we should, we do have the Carroll meeting on August the 25th. So I don't know if that report would just fall under the Board of Selectmen's updates, or if we should have a specific agenda item.
I'll leave that to you and Chris. I mean, it works either way for you.
All right. So, I would say let's just figure out what happens at that meeting, and that will determine whether it's just an update, a Board of Selectmen update, or an official item.
Sounds good.
All right. All right. Well, I don't have anything to add, and as always, we can add things to the agenda by just having a discussion with Chris prior to a meeting being posted. And then with respect to updates, everything that has been discussed in tonight's meeting I would have included in an update. So I don't have anything else, other than to remind citizens that we do have a meeting on August the 25th at 6:30 p.m. The Board of Selectmen and the Carroll Community Center Committee, where we're going to discuss what the path forward might be.
Okay.
I don't have, John, do you have any updates?
No, I just would remind everybody that we received what I guess Chris referred to as a draft of the Hale CR, and I'd expect that to be on an agenda item, or at least being discussed at one of our upcoming meetings. Chris, do you have specifically an idea of when you want to have that conversation?
I would have a better sense of that after this evening's executive session.
Thank you.
All right. Bob, do you have any updates you'd like to share?
No, just a quick reminder that I'm trying to, I've asked Mona, and she's been out some dates to have that town meeting review that we mentioned once or twice. So I think that's going to happen in September, and then I'll have something to talk about.
All right, well, that will be good. So, or not.
Or not.
So, Chris, we'll turn it over to you for your updates.
Great. Just two quick things as we head into September. Budget calendars and budget guidance will start. Capital budget guidance will start to go out. Gosh, and
soon. Almost September.
Yep. So that process will be starting, and then I'm happy to report that we made and had an accepted conditional offer for our municipal project manager position today. And so that, of course, is contingent upon successful background check, as well as the board's 14-day kind of review period, I guess I'd describe it as. But it was a good collaborative process with a lot of folks involved, and we had a really good crop of candidates, which I think is really fortunate. And the selected candidate, I think we'll be able to jump right in and just keep a lot of our things moving, and will fit in well with the organization. So I'll have, now that that's accepted, I'll have all that information, as I do with all these positions, detailed out for you and sent to you early next week.
Well, Chris, it will be nice to be almost full staffed. I guess we're still looking for a town planner, right?
Yep, that's posted, that's out there, and I know the Board of Health has also been working through with their position as well. So the health agent. So yeah, it's
the business analyst or the management analyst.
Yep, and then that will come up once we get the NPM on board.
Right. Yeah, because your team has been very short-staffed over the summer.
Man, a lot of people have been short-staffed.
Yeah. It's not just us. Yep. And that's it for me this evening.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. And so the last item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And in that is the approval of the 2022 state primary warrant, and also approval of some special one-day special liquor licenses for August 16th, 2022, which was retroactive. August 20, 25th, 26th, September 9th, 2nd, 17th, and 23rd. And those are all in the year 2022, just in case anybody
is
concerned about that. And so I will move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, Robin Hunter.
Aye, Bob Springer.
Aye, John Jeffries.
And just so that Mona doesn't have to beg us, she needs us to go to the office tomorrow and sign some of these special licenses. See, Mona, I did your dirty work for you.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate it.
Now, if only I would listen, right?
So Chris, why aren't these e-signature? Why do you have to sign these? They require a wet signature?
So we've talked about this, and it's been described to me that the back and forth between the various entities does not lend itself to an easy e-signature process. What I do have on the list for the MPM is to figure out a way that, if at least the initial stage of the one-day liquor license is more of a kind of paper shuffling, that at least when it gets to the board for final approval, that we're able to have the board e-sign it. And so that'll be a change of the document in the not the existing actual process, but the way that the actual paper is processed. And as I mentioned, it's on the list for our lucky individual to tackle upon their arrival.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
All right, so with that, I move that the board enter into executive session, not to return to open session, for the purpose of conducting strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations regarding Hale Reservation property. Further, as chair, I declare that an open meeting discussion may have been detrimental to the efforts on the negotiating position of the town. So I will take a roll call. I, Robin Hunter.
Hi, Bob Springer.
Hi, John Jeffries.
So I will adjourn this evening's meeting, and we will go into executive session, not to return to open session. So to all those who hung in there listening to our meeting, see you in September. And then we have another dial-in.
All right.
We have another dial-in, but there's not a passcode.
I think that's right.
Okay.
I just followed the links. Okay, bye.
Yeah, John, there's not a passcode, but there's a waiting room. So.
Got it.
Thanks, Kate.
No problem.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.